Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the Paris Agreement is no panacea. This article traces the journey of climate change conventions and agreements. We have the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. As the very name denotes, it is a framework, which means it is the guidelines given to the global community for what that is to combat the negative impact of climate change. So, this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is an international environmental treaty that which was addressing all the negative impacts of the climate change. It came into force in the year 1994. So what was its objective? When you look at the objective, the major one was to stabilize the greenhouse gases. So we had the human induced or the anthropological factors which had consumed enough fossil fuel which had resulted in increasing greenhouse gases. This was creating a chaos in the environment. The global community was disturbed. There was increase in the temperature. So as a result, what we required is a structure, a convention where the global community comes together and fights the menace of the global climate change. In this particular backdrop, the first important convention is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So what is this convention all about? This particular convention divides the countries into broad two categories. One is what is called as the developed countries. The other is what is called as the developing countries. So all those countries which were doing good, their GDP was better, the economy was performing good, were categorized under the developed countries. So these developed countries were also having good economics as well. They were the ones who were able to reap the benefits of the industrial revolution. Let's take the example. We have the United States of America, we have the United Kingdom, we have France, we have Germany, we have Russia and many other countries which got industrially revolutionized back from the year 1800s, and they were able to reap the benefits of the economy. Such countries were categorized as developed countries. Then there are other set of countries. Let's say for example we have China, or let's say India, or let's say we take the example of Brazil. These countries were categorized under the developing countries. So what did this United Nations framework say? According to this convention, all these countries, because they were able to reap the benefits in the past, they have to take the extra burden, give certain commitments to reduce the impact of the climate change. But was it complied? No. Majority of these countries did not comply by it. They did not follow the guidelines. That is when we had to enter another protocol called as the Kyoto Protocol. So what is this Kyoto Protocol? Basically, we had the commitments for the reduction of the emissions, and all these countries were not able to reduce it, and because the convention's rules were not followed and the commitments were inadequate, what we required was called as the Kyoto Protocol. So this Kyoto Protocol was one of the mechanisms to strengthen the global response to the climate change. That is why we have what is called as the Kyoto Protocol, which was taken into clause in the year 1997. So there was large number of countries which came into picture. They started having interaction, they started having all the negotiation. They wanted to operationalize the convention. So what did the convention say? That we are dividing into developed and the developing countries. So the developed countries now had to give a commitment. Earlier the convention only encouraged them to take certain steps, but now the Kyoto Protocol says that you, the rich countries, will have to make a commitment. The commitment is to reduce all the global greenhouse gases that you are emitting. But kindly remember, under the Kyoto Protocol, the commitment and this particular action plan was only to be introduced or to be followed only for the developed countries. Why developed countries? Because you have already developed, because you were able to reap the benefits of industrial revolution. But there are developing countries like China and India which started exploring their economics, started getting the fruits of industrial revolution only from 1970s and 80s. So we cannot club all these countries with the developed countries. So what did this Kyoto Protocol say? we are dividing what is called as the developed countries and the developing countries. This was also present under the convention, but what became mandatory and a commitment is the Kyoto Protocol, saying that the developed countries, will have to reduce the emissions when it comes to the greenhouse gases. So the major distinction between the protocol and the convention is that while this particular convention on the first part only encourage them to cut down, when it comes to the protocol, it is asking them to commit to this particular promise. So this Kyoto Protocol gives a target to all the industrial countries. So what is this target? It commits these 37 industrialized countries and the European Union to the Kyoto target. What is it? It is about reducing greenhouse gases by an average of 5% against the 1990 levels over the period of 2008 up until 2012 period. This particular target was prescribed only for the developed countries. That is because of the common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. What is this common but differentiated responsibility? Common is that we have the climate change, so all of us are coming together, but when it comes to reducing the impact of the climate change, we have differentiated responsibilities. So the developed countries will have to take more responsibility compared to the developing countries, is what is the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. But there is a small problem when it comes to its execution. What is the problem? We have the major countries, let's say United States of America, and after some time we also have Canada, which did not ratify the Kyoto Protocol. Why? Back then we have the president George W. Bush. He was the president of United States of America. He says if United States of America does enter into Kyoto Protocol and ratify this particular protocol, their economy would suffer a lot. So because he feels the economy might come under the danger and threat, he did not go about ratifying this particular protocol. And at the same time, he also says that there is inherent biasness. What is the biasness? There is a separate basket like China and India, which are categorized into developing countries, and you also have another country like United States of America. So this categorization is wrong, says United States of America. And at the same time, they also go on to say that there is no scientific proof for the causes of the climate change. We do not have the solutions for now, and we also do not have the technology for removing or storing the carbon dioxide. Since all these angles are there, the United States of America under George W. Bush does not want to ratify the Kyoto Protocol, and as a result, because the United States of America does not ratify it, which happens to be one of the greatest and the highest emitter of the carbon emissions, Canada also declines to form this particular Kyoto Protocol. So these have been some of the issues when it comes to the Kyoto Protocol. This means there is a complete neglect of all the principles decided under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Followed by this, we have something called as the Copenhagen Accord. So what is it? There are two types of countries here. One led by the United States of America. The other is what is called as the basic countries. So what are these basic countries? We have Brazil, then we have South Africa, then we have China and India. So this Copenhagen Accord is nothing but the Global Climate Action Plan, which was engineered by United States of America along with the basic countries to do what? To reduce the greenhouse impact. But here is a small catch. When it comes to the Kyoto Protocol, the commitment was compulsory. They were not voluntary. They were binding in all the conditions for the developed countries. But when it comes to the Copenhagen, they make a small change where they say that these commitments will be voluntary and not binding on the international developed countries. So what was present under Kyoto Protocol was changed under what is called as the Copenhagen Accord. Under this Copenhagen Accord, whatever action plans that which can be initiated by a particular country will only be made voluntary and they are not legally binding. So what we have is next called as the Paris Agreement. So the virtual agreement that which was accepted in Copenhagen gave a rise to what is called as the Paris Agreement. So what is this Paris Agreement? When you look at the Kyoto Protocol. It clearly went on to say that there is a particular commitment that all the developed countries will have to make, and they have no voluntary commitments, but they have to bind to it. But when it comes to the Paris Agreement, all these countries, irrespective of whether they are developed or developing countries, they have to combat climate change not by a commitment but by the nationally determined contributions. So what is this nationally determined contributions? When it comes to the Kyoto Protocol, all the developed countries had to comply by the rules and they had to restrict it. But when it comes to the nationally determined contributions, there are no restrictions. Each country has its own rules and policies. They regularly report what is the emission that they were able to control and what is the implementation strategy that they are following. So they need not have any benchmark as in Kyoto Protocol, but they, on a voluntary basis, on a nationally determined contributions, they would be in a precautionary measure that they would be able to conduct all their climate change policies and their programs. So there is no commitment here, but all this means that this is a voluntary act and they are the countries who will determine how much that they will be committing for a particular year. This is what is called as the nationally determined contributions. So all the countries were placed on an equal footing. There is no differentiation of the developed countries and the developing countries. This is where we have number of concerns as voiced by the author. So what does the author say in this particular case? What we have to remember is that when there is a particular commitment made by a particular country, how will you see it? What are the measures that you look at? And in case they do not actually comply by their own rules, will they have any penalty? But that was not the same when it comes to Kyoto Protocol. There were certain penalties that were laid as well, but when it comes to the Paris Agreement, there are no penalties whatsoever, and in case they are not able to meet up, what is the alternative? That was not discussed under the Paris Agreement. Further, you also have the scientists who were deeply disappointed as well. Why? Because all these mechanisms that which is put forward under the Paris Agreement will not be sufficient for the global community to restrict the temperature increase lesser than 2 degrees centigrade. If we are not able to reduce the temperature exposure be less than 2 degrees centigrade, what we will have is more catastrophe because of the climate change. So merely coming up with what is called as the nationally determined contributions without any penalty, without any benchmark, without any commitment, only through the voluntary act will not serve the purpose under the Paris Agreement, says the author in this particular case. So what will be the impact of the temperature rise? Let's say for example, if the global temperature rises by about 1.5 degrees centigrade, in that particular case nearly 70 to 90% of the coral reef world over will immediately die. Let's say if this is less than 2 degrees centigrade or it goes beyond that, then in that case most, in fact all of the coral reefs will die as well. And even if the earth turns up into 1 degree hotter, what we will have a catastrophe, a hotter planet, says the Intergovernmental Panel on the Climate Change. So the IPCC has also clarified that it becomes very tough for the biodiversity to sustain, and we will have a threat and extinction of number of species because of the climate change. So what is the way forward? When you look into what this article says, we should not look at our country and their country. The nationalistic chauvinism and the jingoism should be completely set aside. This is a global problem. An issue which might surface in China might also be impacting many other countries as well. In case the emissions that are increased in United States of America, it might haunt a country like Maldives as well. Why? Because they will be completely submerged because of the industrial activities of some other country. If there is air pollution somewhere, this might also bring a devastation to some other country as well. So what we require is a complete transformation on the global economy. So countries should stop their chauvinistic and jingoistic attitude, nationalistic attitude, and come together as a global community to make sure that the goal of net zero emissions is met by 2050. And we also have a prospect with the elect of the Joe Biden, who will be the next president of United States of America. He has also said that he would be part of the Paris Agreement because the Trump administration had signaled that they would withdraw from the Paris Agreement. But what the United States of America will also have to make sure is they commit to the idea of common but differentiated responsibility. They should not see the developing country in parity with the developed country. Why? What we require is the economic justice. So kindly remember, we have the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change happens to be the first talk which speaks about historic injustice. So if this historic injustice perpetuated by the developed countries has to be normalized, justice of climate has to be delivered, there has to be no parity between the developed and the developing countries. They are two different baskets for whatever has happened in the past. In the historical context, the developed countries will have to take more responsibility, is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says historic recession. This article in the initial part speaks about one of the technical concepts called as technical recession. So what is this technical recession? Let's say for example, we have something called as the business cycle. So what is this business cycle? Let's say for example, we have the economy which is really doing good, and whenever there is an economy which is doing good, there is a rise of GDP compared to the previous quarter. What we have is called as the expansionary phase. So what is this expansionary phase? Where the GDP is doing good compared to the previous quarter. Then we have something called as the recessionary phase. So what is it? When the total value of output produced is often compared in GDP terms, and compared to the previous GDP, there is a drop, there is a fall. That is what is called as recessionary phase. So in the expansionary phase, what we have is the increase in the GDP numbers compared to the previous quarter. When you look at the recessionary phase, you have a drop when it comes to the GDP numbers compared to the previous quarter. So when you have the expansionary and the recessionary phase, when you gel it up together, what you find is called as the business cycle. First, here what we have to understand is the meaning of recession, and then we will look at the meaning of technical recession. Let's say for example, there are lot many departments, lot many sectors which is facing the heat. There is a dearth, there is a problem, there is decline of the activity in the economy over a long period of time. Let's say for about 6 months, or let's say for about 1 year, and this has increased for a couple of months as well. That is what is called as recession. So a recession takes place when a recessionary phase lasts for an inordinate amount of time. So if the GDP continues to contract for a sustained period, the economy is said to have fallen in what is called as the recession. So when there is this particular idea of the whole economy going into doldrums, not working effectively, there is contraction in the economy, decline in the numbers for a considerable period of time. That is what is called as the recession. Now the question is, what is this technical recession? A recession is called as a technical recession when you have 2 quarter numbers which has had a decline. So when there is a contraction of the numbers, that is recessionary phase for about 2 quarters, that is what is called as the technical recession. So ideally, when it comes to the real recession, where you have the entire economy in trouble, multiple sectors are in trouble, and when it comes to the technical recession, what you have is 2 quarters going into a problem. So the economic activity and the contraction, when it comes to 2 consecutive quarters, that is what is called as technical recession. Let me give you an example. With respect to India, when you go back to the month of April up until June, what you actually see is the contraction, which is about 23.9%. Now, when you look into the second quarter, that is between July and September, you also have a contraction of about 7.5%. So what we actually witness is a contraction for 2 quarters. So when there is a contraction for 2 quarters, that is what is called as the technical recession. Also remember, we have another video recorded by Shamsa in Economy this week, which clearly speaks about contraction, why there is contraction, and what we mean by contraction. Everything is explained in that video. The link for the same will also be given in the description box. As part of the discussion, we also have to understand, is recession happening for the very first time? According to CRISIL data, it says India also faced recession in the past as well. When you consider the fiscals of the year 1958 and the year 1966 and in the year 1980, we did face recession, says CRISIL data. When you go back to the year 1958, in the year 1957, we had a lot of issues when it comes to the agriculture sector. Why? Because we had the weak monsoon, because we were not able to generate enough amount of food grains, because the agricultural productivity was less. What we actually witnessed is drop when it comes to the agricultural productivity. Since there was a drop in the agricultural productivity, India had to import a lot of agricultural goods. Since India had to import, our import bills also started increasing. Since India had to face the heat of agricultural production and our exports was also comparatively less, there was a point of recession, says the CRISIL data. Then we have to go back to the year 1966. When you go back to the year 1966, India in the year 1962 had fought a war with China. Then we had a war with Pakistan in the year 1965, and we also had droughts back in the year 1966 as well. Due to droughts and because of the food production decline as well, India had to face a similar instance of recession in the year 1966. And then when we go back to the year 1980, again India was facing a lot of heat because of external sector disturbances. What was happening in the external sector? Back in the year 1979, Iran was facing what is called as the Iran Revolution, and they were also engaged in war with Iraq as well. So there was Iran-Iraq war, and we were also seeing that Indian exports was comparatively less. So what was happening here? Because there was a decline of the production of oil, India was not able to import the oil from Iran as well as from other West Asian countries. Why? Because of the chaos. So what exactly happened? Import bills started increasing because India had to procure its fuel from some other country, and as a result, India also felt the heat of recession during 1980. So these are the statistics that which CRISIL feels India faced in instances of recession. So what we have to understand right now is that we have to compare and we have to understand whether the recession back then and today is the same. So when it comes to this today's scenario, it is not only impacting one single sector, but we are also impacted by COVID-19. So the COVID-19 induced recession is totally different from what we had seen in the past, is what we have to understand under this article. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about farm bills. We have discussed about the farm bills, what it is all about, what are the three bills in our last week's CNA. So let's not discuss in detail about this particular article, but let's have a bird eye view what this article speaks about. More than 500 farmers, they are on a path of agitation. They are heading towards Delhi as well, and they are asking the central government to dilute or remove all these three bills that which the central government has introduced as part of the agricultural reforms. In fact, when the central government requested all these agricultural leaders as well as their unions to have a word with the central government, they did not want to speak as well. They did not want to go to the designated place for conducting their strikes as well as talks. This shows the gravity of the incident. All that the farmers currently want is complete dilution or the removal of the farm bills. Now the question is, why is that the farmers are looking for it? According to them, the central government made three mistakes when it comes to the agricultural farm bills. So what are those? One, it was rushing with respect to the bill. What is the rush all about? Why did not the central government speak to the farmers? Why did they not consult with respect to the farmers? They are the major stakeholders. Since they are the major stakeholders, they should have been consulted. All the other major stakeholders should have been consulted. They should have spoken to the traders, and because they did not do it and because they rushed it, they have committed two mistakes, says the farmer union. And apart from that, they did not have the political nexus as well, or the political consensus as well. When you look at the opposition political parties or other regional parties as well, they were not happy with the agricultural reforms. So why go with this particular bill is what is being asked by the farming community. The farmers also feel that the center has refused to address all their specific concerns, especially with respect to the MSP. The central government has clarified that MSP will not be removed when it comes to all the agricultural bills, and MSP as a provision will be retained. But what the farmers want is the explicit mention in the law, which according to them has been failed by the central government, says the agricultural union. The farmers are also fighting against the electricity amendment bill 2020. Why? Because they feel if this particular bill is introduced, the central government and the state government can remove or take away all the subsidies that which is given under the electricity today. Today we have number of farmers who have been awarded or given with electricity subsidy. If this electricity amendment bill of 2020 does come into practice, does come into implementation, they feel that this will also end the subsidized electricity. These are some of the issues concerning the farmers. So the central government going forward will have to speak up to them, establish an interest and balance both the views of the central government and the farmers as well. And going forward, they have to win the confidence of the farmers, speak to them unconditionally, reach to them and emphatically understand what are the various issues with respect to the farm bills. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. But kindly remember, with respect to the farm bills, we have already had an elaborate analysis in our last week's CNA. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the assassination of scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. We did discuss about this issue in our yesterday's CNA, but one of the important angles with respect to this issue is the involvement of Saudi Arabia. We recently had the head of the Israel going up to Saudi Arabia. So Netanyahu had a clandestine trip to Saudi Arabia as well. So indirectly, can we say that Saudi Arabia, United States of America and Israel have come together and they have conducted this activity. Why? Because they were cementing an anti-Iran front. They wanted to put pressure on the Trump administration to destroy all the nuclear installations as well. Now, since one of the important senior scientists has been killed, there could be a possibility where Iran can also fight back as well. In case there is a fight back from Iran, this also means that United States of America under Joe Biden administration in the near future will not be able to have a constructive dialogue with respect to the joint comprehensive plan of action. The major issue right now is that all these three forces, the United States of America under the Trump administration, Saudi Arabia and Israel, want to make sure that Iran is decimated in this particular region. Why? Because Saudi Arabia wants to be a leader in the Western Asia. So if there is a parallel leader in the form of Iran, it will not be good for the hegemony and the dominance of Saudi Arabia. And as a result, what they want is the complete silencing of Iran in this particular case. So this article currently says there is an indirect way where Saudi Arabia is also involved in the elimination of nuclear scientists. And apart from that, we also have Iran, which has gone on to say that they will wait for the opportunity, and when time permits, when they have all data, they will give it back to all those countries who have committed this heinous act of killing their nuclear scientists. It is this that we have to understand with reference to both these articles. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Jaija Dam, recently seen in news, is being constructed in which country? Is it Bhutan, Nepal, China or Bangladesh? The answer to this is China. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, China has begun the construction of three important dams. One is what is called as the Dagu, the next is what is called as Jiksu, the third is what is called as Jiacha. So kindly remember, we have the Dagu and Jiksu dams which are being constructed in the upper stream, and we have the Jiacha dam which is being constructed on the lower stream. What is the importance of this article? This article currently says in case there is construction of the dam, this can have a major impact both on India as well as on Bangladesh. Why? Because China happens to be upper riparian country and India and Bangladesh happen to be a lower riparian country. In case there is less restriction or there is less water of Brahmaputra to the lower riparian countries, it is the farmers in the lower lying region who will be the major sufferers. And apart from this, if large dams are also constructed, there is a probability of earthquake in this particular region. Then this can also destroy the environment as well, and all those people who have been living on the banks of Brahmaputra, extracting the benefits from Brahmaputra, living in the agricultural areas, fishing is their major livelihood mechanism, such people will also face the brunt as well. So ecologically, seismically, and when it comes to economic activity, it will be a major problem is what we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Kibber Wildlife Sanctuary, which of the following statements is or correct? It is one of the largest sanctuaries in Himachal Pradesh. Kibber happens to be only cold desert wildlife sanctuary in India. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, this is present in the state of Himachal Pradesh and it happens to be the only cold desert wildlife sanctuary in India. Because it is present at high altitudes in the state of Himachal Pradesh and it is comparatively remote in place, that is why you have number of species which are safeguarded by the nature as well. And this happens to be very close to the Spiti River is what we have to understand with respect to this image. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with reference to Organization of Islamic Cooperation. It is the world's largest intergovernmental organization. The OIC has permanent delegations to United Nations and European Union. It is headquartered in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 and 3. Why? Because this organization is not the world's largest, but it is the second world's largest. Why? Because the first is the United Nations. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. There are two viewpoints to this article. Should India take OIC seriously when it comes to the Kashmir issue, or should it not take the viewpoints of OIC with respect to Kashmir? When we say India has to take it seriously, we have to make sure that Pakistan every now and then brings up this particular issue on the OIC. So what is it doing? It is creating an image to the global communities who are part of this particular organization that India is encroaching on the rights of individual people. This is not right. This is what Pakistan projects. So if countries believe it, then it can be a diplomatic problem for India. So India will have to take seriously the words of OIC and will have to confront it. It has to oppose it and will have to bring the reality right in front of the world is one point of view. The other point of view is India need not have to take OIC very seriously. Why? Because India is not part of OIC, and when you look at OIC, OIC adds number of people. Let's say for example, it is not able to confront the issues that which is happening in Myanmar with respect to the Rohingyas, or let's say for example in Palestine as well. So there are a number of countries who are part of OIC. They are not able to protect all these countries. They are not able to solve a problem even in Syria as well. They are not able to bridge the gap between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Since they are not able to solve their own problems when it comes to the OIC, India should not take them seriously is another perspective. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following are correctly matched? We have the terrorist organization and the region that they operate in. Al-Badr in France, Boko Haram, Nigeria, Al-Shabaab, East Africa. The answer to this is 2 and 3 only. Why? Because Al-Badr does not operate in France, but instead it is operating in India. This Al-Badr as a terrorist organization was popped up by the Pakistan Inter-Services Agency. So we have the ISI which has popped up this particular terrorist organization, and India and United States of America calls this organization a terrorist organization. Now why have we taken this practice question? because of the reference given under this article with respect to Boko Haram. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to solar water pumps, consider the following statements. Solar power can be used for running surface pumps and not for submersible pumps. Solar power can be used for running centrifugal pumps and not the ones with piston. Which of the statements given above is correct? The answer to this is neither one nor two. Why? Because all these actions can be taken up by the solar power. Now let's look into the mains practice question. The Paris Agreement is a repudiation of the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities and the polluter must pay principle. Explain. Has India witnessed any recessions in the past? How is the current one different? So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and also come up with constructive criticism. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.